someone that talks about that kind of America where dreams become reality, and worked while he was secretary to President Obama, worked to expand the promise of opportunity. Even Obama saw the talent in this Democrat. Hillary Clinton saw and put on the short list for vice president the talent in this secretary. He worked to make housing more accessible, decrease homelessness among our veterans. Even understood, he knows that we have Frank Holloman here. Stand up, Frank. Mr. Education on the big round. The secretary understood, and he worked to put internet access in public housing. So I want you all, as we look for the future, as we look to put people first, that we believe in working together to realize the promise of America, and do that by hard work and a future for all, by someone who believes in our future, none other than Julian Castro for President, United States of America 2020. Let's give him a South Carolina welcome. Let's stand to your feet. People first. Julian 2020. Our future. Respect and honor. Mr. Secretary, from there, Mr. President.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon.
Buenas tardes.
First of all, let me say a huge gracias, thank you to Representative Robinson Simpson for your tremendous leadership, for the career that you have had working to bridge divides and bring people together and make sure that everybody has a place at the table. And thank you for being here today. Thank you as well to State Senator Allen for your leadership and your great work here in District 7, for fighting the good fight at the State House and making sure that everybody is well represented and even the voiceless have a voice in you. Thank you for being here. Let's give him a big round of applause. And I want to also give a quick shout out to Christina Q, who is our State Director.
Yeah.
So some of y'all know, I know, Christina's here. Doing a fantastic job. Well, you know, this is my first visit to Greenville. My first visit to Greenville. I know, I probably saw some of y'all at the state convention and the fish fry, right, a few weeks back. And I've been to Charleston, I've been to Columbia, I've been to Orangeburg, I've been to a couple of other parts of the state, but this is my first visit to this community. I want to say a huge thank you to each and every one of you for coming out here today. I truly appreciate it. I always like to remind folks, you know, that I often need a name tag because I have a twin brother. And some of y'all may have seen my twin brother on Wolf Blitzer's show or one of the MSNBC shows. He's Joaquin. I think he did the drawing for me the other day on CNN at the live drawing event. And somebody else said, he's grown a beard. But he always likes to go around telling people that the way to tell us apart is that I'm 1 minute uglier than he is. Which is not true. I'm a minute older. And you know, I'm here today in part because Joaquin and I have lived our American dream. And I just wanted to really briefly take a moment to comment on the events of the last week that I know all of us have been affected by. Over the last week, we've seen a president that is engaging in tremendous identity politics of his own, that is building his case for re-election on dividing people along racial and ethnic and religious lines. Instead of bringing together, he's trying to tear them apart for his own political advancement. This is not the first time we've seen this. Y'all in South Carolina know that very well, just like we do in Texas. Throughout the generations in this country, we have seen politicians that were trying to build themselves up by tearing other people down. But throughout those generations, we have also seen people who have been dedicated, whatever their background was, whether they were white, black, Latino, Asian American, Native American, rich, poor, wherever they came from in the country, they were dedicated to bringing people together, to reaching beyond our differences, appreciating our differences, understanding that all of us do have a place at the table. That as a country, we can only get stronger if we work together to create a greater future for all of us. And about a year ago, I went on Father's Day to this place called the Ursula Processing Center down in McAllen, Texas, at the border, where they were separating little children from their parents. I joined a group of activists that were outside of the center to protest there. And as sad as what was happening in that center was, what gave me hope was that the people that were outside of it objecting to it were of all different backgrounds, like the people in this room. Because what unites us, the values of compassion and respect for one another, and love of country, and faith, and family. You know that those don't know any skin color, or income level, or geography, or sexual orientation, or anything else. This president is betting that our country is so small that enough people are going to re-elect him based on division. And I'm betting that we're big enough to come together and go in a different direction because we understand compassion and respect and love for one another. That's what I'm betting on. And so, I wanted to come here today. I grew up in San Antonio with my mom and my grandmother. My grandmother had come over from Mexico when she was 7 years old with her little sister because their parents had died. And their closest relatives lived in San Antonio. Hopefully some of y'all have visited it before. The Riverwalk, the Alamo, the San Antonio Spurs, right? Although they're not quite doing as well these days as they were doing before. My grandmother, like I bet a lot of your family members, grew up with very little. She got yanked out of school when she was still in elementary, so she never finished elementary school. She worked as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter. Raised my mom as a single parent. My mom raised my brother and me as a single parent after our parents split up when we were 8. Joaquin and I are proud products of the public schools of San Antonio. We had the chance to go off to college at Stanford and then law school at Harvard and go back home and become the first in our family to become professionals as lawyers. And then I got elected to the San Antonio City Council when I was 26 years old. 4 years later, I ran for mayor. I was 30 and trying to become the youngest elected mayor in the city's history, running against a gentleman that was 70 and trying to become the second oldest mayor in the city's history. And he won in a close runoff and turned out to be a good mayor, but we had strict term limits. So I came back 4 years later and I became the mayor of my hometown. I served for 5 years until I got a phone call on April 16, 2014, from President Barack Obama. And I remember the date because it's not every day that the president calls you and asks you if you want a job. I had just driven through the drive-thru at Panda Express. And you know how on your phone, if it's an unknown call, it'll say unknown or block call? It said private. So if you ever get a phone call that says private, answer the phone. Hopefully it'll be me on the other end of the line calling. I did answer the phone, and I ended up serving President Obama as his Secretary of Housing and Urban Development for the last 2.5 years of the administration. During that time, I managed a department that had a $48 billion budget, 8,000 employees, 54 field offices across the country. I had a chance to visit and to work with 100 different communities in 39 states and to see how communities across our country, big and small, are grappling not only with housing, but the fact that housing often determines, where you live often determines the quality of your kids' education. It often determines the job opportunities that you have available to you. It obviously determines transit opportunities. In places like Flint, Michigan, that I visited a month ago, and I had visited as HUD Secretary during the Flint water crisis, it determines something as basic as whether you can drink clean water. It also determines healthcare opportunities. In a lot of small towns and rural communities, you all know that rural hospitals are having a tough time. A lot of them have either closed or parts of them, like inpatient psychiatric care or OBGYN care, has closed. I'm running for president because I believe that we need new leadership with a new vision for the future of this country. A vision that understands, we need leadership that understands that instead of telling people to go back anywhere, that we all count, we all have a place at the table, and that we're going to need to move forward as one nation with one destiny. And I'm convinced that in the years ahead, the destiny for this beautiful nation is to be the smartest, the healthiest, the fairest, and the most prosperous nation on earth. The smartest, the healthiest, the fairest, and the most prosperous nation on earth. If we're going to be the smartest nation on earth, it means starting early with universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds in our country. When I was mayor of San Antonio, I put on the ballot something we had never done before. A ballot initiative called Pre-K for SA to raise the sales tax by 1/8 of a cent to significantly expand high-quality full-day pre-K in our city. And, you know, we were a little bit worried because we're in Texas. Y'all can understand being in South Carolina. You say sales tax, property tax, any kind of tax, people are like, what are you talking about, right? But I knew that the number one thing we had to do in that community was to improve our educational achievement, right? Because jobs require more knowledge and more skill than ever before. And on election night, 53.5% of the voters in San Antonio said yes to investing in our 4-year-olds. Because of that, that city has one of the best pre-K programs in all of the country. I'm very proud of it, and we need to do universal pre-K throughout the United States so that every child can get a strong start. We also need to improve K through 12 education. I put out an education plan about a month ago that calls for paying teachers what they deserve. We would start with a tax credit for teachers that would range between $2,000 to $10,000. Teachers would get at least a $2,000 tax credit, and then it would scale upwards from there based on the percentage of students at the school they teach that are on free or reduced lunch, so that we encourage teachers to go and teach in those communities, those schools that are often the toughest. Yeah. It also includes investing in professional development and mid-career opportunities, because we know that too oftentimes you'll get teachers that teach for 2 or 3 years or a couple of years, and then they leave the profession. They get discouraged. So we need to find a way to bridge that time. I also know that we need to continue to reduce class sizes and ensure that no matter what the needs of a child are, that they can have those needs met in the school that they go to or close by. Because too oftentimes, the parents of special needs children feel like they got to be lawyers to argue with the bureaucracy that even when it's well-meaning, oftentimes is not able to provide the education that their child needs. We can do better than that. We also have to do 2 things when it comes to preparing our young people for higher education and gainful employment in the future. Number 1, we need to return trade programs into our high schools, because there are tremendous opportunities in trade programs. A lot of jobs out there where tradesmen and tradeswomen are getting older and older, and they need replacements at some point when they retire, right? A lot of vacancies that go unfilled right now because the skills aren't there. We can fill that gap through investing in high school trade programs and with employers so that they can get those skills. On top of that, we need to make public state universities, community colleges, and job training and certification programs in our country tuition free, so that everybody who wants it can get a higher education. And this is not a radical idea. There are folks in this room that will remember that just a generation or 2 ago, there were a whole bunch of state university systems that were either tuition free or almost tuition free. In my neck of the woods of Texas, people will tell you in the 80s that it was $50 or $100 per semester per credit hour. In the University of California system, it was free, tuition free, all the way up through the late 70s, early 80s. I don't know what it was like here in South Carolina, but I bet that it was a lot cheaper a generation ago than it is today. And here's the thing, y'all here in Greenville, you know that there's been a lot of investment here by different companies, right? I think BMW, and did I hear Michelin, right? And others. Look, today the United States is engaged in a competition with countries around the world that are producing tons and tons of young people that are well educated. They're hardworking, they're ambitious, they're creative, they're innovative. That means to compete, we don't have a single person to waste. We need to make sure that everybody is able to do well in high school, and then if they want, get a higher education so that we can be competitive as a country in the years to come. If we want to be the healthiest nation on earth, we need a different healthcare system. I grew up with a grandmother who had type 2 diabetes. And as my brother Joaquin and I got older and she got older, her condition grew worse and worse. Until right before she died in early 1996, she had to have one of her feet amputated. Which, as y'all will know, is not uncommon for severe diabetics. But that whole time, my grandmother had Medicare. I want to strengthen Medicare for the people who are on it, and then make sure that Medicare is available to everybody who wants it in the United States. I also believe that if somebody has private health insurance that they're happy with, that they like, that is a solid plan, that they should be able to hold on to that. We can do both of those things. We can do both of those things. What I don't believe is that the profit motive of big pharmaceutical companies or others should ever determine whether somebody is able to get the health care and medication that they need when they need it in this, the wealthiest nation in the world. And y'all have seen this. I bet some of y'all have dealt with this. I mean, insulin costs a fraction in Canada of what it does in the United States. You remember the EpiPen from a couple of years ago? They jacked up the rate, the cost, over a couple of years because they could. I was in New Hampshire yesterday. Some folks that live in New Hampshire, they go to Canada to get their drugs. In Texas, people go to Mexico to get drugs and to get procedures done. Dental procedures, medical procedures, because it's a lot cheaper. That shouldn't be the way that we operate. We also need to do things like end this distinction between mental health care and physical health care and invest in mental health care services. Invest in mental health care. Because too oftentimes, people in our families, they suffer in silence, not getting the treatment they need. Maybe it's not covered. Or sometimes even when it is covered, y'all know that there's still a stigma that is attached to mental health issues. We need to end that. And that begins by making sure there's proper treatment available for it. If we're going to be the fairest nation on earth, we have to reimagine our justice system. We need to invest in sentencing reform, public defenders, cash bail reform. We need to do things like invest in diversion programs so that instead of getting caught up in the prison system, folks can go and get the help they need on low-level offenses, and do things like legalize marijuana, which we know we can do. We know we can regulate in a steady and sensible way. We also know that, unfortunately, those laws are enforced against communities of color differently from others. We need to end that. I also know, like you do, that law enforcement begins out there on the streets. Just the other day, the Justice Department announced, on the brink of the 5-year anniversary and the statute of limitations of the case of Eric Garner, that it would not pursue charges against the officer who choked Eric Garner to death. How many of these videos do we have to watch of Eric Garner, of Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Laquan McDonald, Antonio Arce in Phoenix, Pamela Turner, Jason Perro, Stephon Clark, Walter Scott right here in South Carolina. How many of these videos do we have to watch before we understand that too oftentimes, especially young black men, are treated differently at the hands of police? And look, I was a mayor. I know that there are a lot of great police officers out there. But I don't think that this is just a case of a few bad apples. The system is broken. And we need to fix it. We need to fix it. We absolutely need to fix it. I am proud that I'm the only candidate that has put forward a police reform plan to work with our police to ensure that there's more accountability and transparency, to set a national use of force standard that means that no matter whether you live here in Greenville or you live in my hometown of San Antonio or in small town California or Texas or wherever, that you're treated the same when it comes to the decision of an officer to use lethal force. Because why should you be treated differently based on the color of your skin or what town you live in? That should be determined, of course, by the circumstances of the moment. My use of force standard, which California just passed a similar piece of legislation, would say that an officer should exhaust other reasonable alternatives in the circumstances before using lethal force. Doesn't matter who the person is, right? And I believe that it's time to demilitarize our police and end this policing. Because for the last 15 or so years, we started providing military equipment to police departments out there. And I believe that that's led to over-aggressive policing in some instances. I would also work with Congress to end racial profiling and stop and frisk that have too oftentimes been abused. People have been profiled. And finally, I would do things like create a national database of officers that have been decertified because of misconduct. Because you know that right now, one doesn't exist. And so an officer can commit misconduct and then go down the road to another personnel department and get hired. Ultimately, the goal is to have stronger and better police departments because they do an important and dangerous job. And we honor that job that they do. But we also know fundamentally that whether you're a mayor or you're the president or you're a city council member or you're a state legislator or you're a police officer, they work for you. You don't work for them. They work for you. They're there for you. If we're going to be the fairest nation on earth, we also need to do things like pass the Equal Rights Amendment and ensure that women get equal pay. We all saw, of course, the great win of the U.S. women's national team. It inspired all of us. Right? But it's sad that they're another example that they're underpaid compared to the men's team. I mean, that happens in every walk of life, in offices, in factories, in hospitals, in schools. We need to change that. I also believe we need to pass the Equality Act so that you can't be discriminated against if you're gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, in housing or in employment. You see, this president, when he says somebody should go back home, or when he basks in the chant of send her back, what he's really saying is that it's okay to have second-class citizens in this country. We cannot have second-class citizens. We will never have second-class citizens if I'm president of the United States. If we're going to be the most prosperous nation on earth, it has to mean prosperity for everybody. We need to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Pass that legislation that the House of Representatives passed the other day that raises it to $15 an hour by 2025. Ensure that labor unions have the ability to more effectively organize, because labor unions have been so important to the progress of the middle class in our country. And to invest in things like housing that's affordable to the middle class, to the working poor and the poor. I bet what y'all see here in Greenville is what communities like Reno, Nevada see. Reno, Nevada recently got a big Tesla investment. They have other investments that are coming from California. Y'all have these relatively new investments over the last few years here in Greenville. That's great. It brings a lot of opportunity. which is wonderful. It also brings higher rents. It brings a crunch in the housing market. We went through a housing crisis a decade or so ago where a lot of people lost their homes. In fact, we still have one of the lowest home ownership rates now in the last 40 years. So there's even tighter rental market. So my affordable housing plan calls for investing in more housing supply that is affordable to the middle class and everybody that makes less than that. So we add to supply out there. It also increases the housing choice voucher program so that if you make less than 50% of the area median income, you're able to get a voucher and go get housing. And my plan calls for making investments to end homelessness in America by 2028. And let me just say, I know some of y'all may hear that, and you may say, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's 9 years away, right? That sounds like it's Pollyannish. Barack Obama in 2010 released a blueprint for ending homelessness called Opening Doors. The first goal was to end veteran homelessness. Between 2010 and 2016, we reduced veteran homelessness by 47% in our country. And we did it because Washington worked the way that it should. The administration had a vision. It got 19 different federal departments together to work together. HUD, the VA, Health and Human Services, Department of Education, 19 different agencies. The First Lady launched the Mayor's Challenge to end veteran homelessness, and more than 800 local and state officials signed up for that challenge. Republicans and Democrats worked together in Congress to actually appropriate the money for housing choice vouchers and the money for caseworkers at the VA so they could help veterans that needed homes. So we saw that when we actually work together on big things, we can actually accomplish them. Today we're marking 50 years since Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. And I wasn't there. I was born in 1974. But I know that we do have some folks who were there who will probably remember watching that moment. And I can only imagine the sense of pride and excitement that y'all must have felt watching that on July 20th, 1969 on a black and white TV, or maybe some people had color TV. We can do big things again in this country. We can do big things if we work together. We should not give up on the idea that just because we have some folks that constantly try to obstruct progress, or some siren song of backward motion like the president of trying to pull us backward. Don't give up on the idea that America can be greater than that. We can be. We can tackle big problems. And finally, if we're going to be the most prosperous nation on earth, we need to reform our immigration system. We need to reform our immigration system. I hope that y'all will check out my immigration plan at JulianCastro.com. It represents a completely different vision of how we should do immigration than this president. It says that we can maintain border security, but we should treat people with common sense and with compassion instead of cruelty. Stop family separation. Stop putting people in cages. I mean, think about that. Think about the difference between the pride that we feel watching that footage of Neil Armstrong on the moon and then watching those men in those pictures when the vice president visited that center the other day of people behind chain link fence telling the camera that they're hungry and that they haven't been able to brush their teeth and that they haven't been able to take a shower. And those images of little children sleeping on cold concrete floors in these mylar blankets that look like aluminum foil. One of those things is America and the other is not. I believe that we need an immigration system that puts undocumented immigrants, as long as they haven't committed a serious crime, on a path to citizenship. Our dreamers, but not only our dreamers, also their parents and other undocumented immigrants who are working hard. It tries to get at the root cause of this problem, right? The root cause of this challenge is that people can't find safety and opportunity in Central America. So I say that what we need is essentially a 21st century Marshall Plan to partner with Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, so that people can find safety and opportunity over there instead of having to come over here. And we can also improve the legal immigration system. We need to fix the legal immigration system too, so it doesn't take so long for people who are trying to do it the legal way. Cut down on the wait times. Make sure that more people are able to reunify with their family. Harness the talent from around the world. And people don't often talk in these terms about immigration, but I'll say, look, what's happening in the United States today, if you look at our country, is that demographically, we have a baby boomer population that is turning 65 at record numbers and drawing down on Social Security, which you should. You earned it. That is yours. We should never make Social Security weaker. We should only make it stronger. Right? You earned that. You earned it. But last year, we had the lowest birth rate in our country in 32 years. The lowest birth rate in 32 years. We have an aging population in America now. Right? At the same time that it's projected that in 2035, the Social Security Trust Fund could expire. We see countries around the world like Japan that are grappling in full with an aged population where they can't replenish a young workforce. So part of the answer to a healthy, young, vibrant, entrepreneurial, hardworking workforce is immigration. Is an orderly, common sense approach to immigration. And don't let Donald Trump or anybody else try and scare you or create division or tell you that there's not a way we can do this where everybody is able to win. Not only the people that are seeking a better life and running from desperate circumstances in their home country, but each and every one of your families, as we make sure that things like Social Security are stronger in the years ahead, and that we're able to replenish America with that entrepreneurial spirit that whether people came from Ireland or Italy or Germany or China or India or Mexico in the years before, has added to places like South Carolina and my home state of Texas and so many other places. That is what we need to do in the years to come. And that's what I'm committed to doing. So the last thing I'll say is that if we're going to be the most prosperous nation on earth, we need to tackle the most existential threat to this country. We need to lead on climate change again. We need to lead on climate change. My first executive order would be to recommit the United States to the Paris Climate Accord. So that we're leading again. And then I would go around the world and seek stronger commitments from our allies and our adversaries to get to net zero in the years ahead. Because I know, like I'm sure you do, that we don't have to choose between protecting our planet on the one hand and creating great jobs in the clean energy economy, right? This is about both of those things. We should never, ever take our eyes off the ball. This is a golden opportunity to create employment, good jobs. When I was mayor of San Antonio, I sat on the local public utility board, and we decided to shutter a couple of our coal-fired plants to move toward renewable energy. We did a 400 megawatt solar facility. But we didn't stop there at just getting the panels built out in San Antonio. We also brought the entire manufacturing chain to the city so that we created 800 jobs as well. Now, this is an industry that changes, right, all the time. But that is the kind of approach that I would like to see for the United States, to take advantage of those economic opportunities that exist. Because why should China or some other country lead in the clean energy future? We should be the leaders in that, and I'm committed to doing it. So I just wanted to come by today and to introduce myself, you know, we had a good debate a couple of weeks ago, and we're looking forward to the next one.
You did great.
Thank you very much. Since that debate, we've been getting a lot more word of mouth. Thank you to everybody that may have pitched in $5 also. We hit the donor threshold for the September debate as well. So if you contributed, thank you very much. I think what you saw in that debate is that I can get in there and go toe-to-toe. And that's what people are looking for in the Democratic nominee, because we know on the other side we have Donald Trump. Right? I think folks are looking for somebody with the right vision for the future of the country. And I think I started to sketch that out today. I hope that you'll go to JulianCastro.com and check out more of our plans. And we're going to have more coming on climate change and a number of other issues. And I hope for those of y'all that already support my campaign, that you'll be the biggest loudmouths of the 2020 season. Talk to your friends and your family, your coworkers, harass them on Facebook, send them emails, write them an old-fashioned letter if you have to. For those of y'all that are still thinking about who you're going to support, thank you for taking the time to be here today. I liken this to like shopping for courses at the beginning of a college semester. People are kind of going and listening to the lecture and stuff. I like this one, I don't like that one. I might go back. I hope that you all will stay tuned to the campaign. Go to the website, check out the debates, all of that, and I hope that I can earn your support. Let me tell you this, okay? I don't want to take us backward. I don't want to make our country anything again. I want us to go forward and be better than we've ever been in the future. And with one exception, I want to restore some integrity and decency to the Oval Office. It has gone missing. It has gone missing. And just very, very briefly, let me tell you this last 2-minute story. I got tested very early on in my tenure in public service. I went back home when I was 26 after I graduated from law school with my brother because we couldn't get rid of each other. And I got a job at the biggest law firm in town. I was making $100,000 a year. I bought a house, I bought a car. I had a student loan payment that was around $950 a month. By the way, my education plan addresses student loan debt too. And then I got elected to the city council. And on the city council in San Antonio, even though it was a city of over 1 million people, it only paid $1,040 a year. They had a throwback charter from 1951. So everybody had another job. My job was at the law firm. A few months after I got elected, they got a client. And the client wanted the city council that I sat on to approve a land deal. The land deal was that they wanted us to give incentives for them to build a golf course over our water supply because we relied on an underground aquifer for our water. I didn't think their environmental plan was strong enough, so I wanted to vote against it. I had concerns that the chemicals that you use on a golf course to keep it beautiful, which are a lot, might seep into the recharge zone of the aquifer and compromise the integrity of the drinking water. I wanted to vote against it. My constituents wanted me to vote against it. But under the professional rules of conduct, the ethics rules for lawyers, like yes, ethics rules do exist for lawyers. You can't just go against the interests of a client. So I was stuck. My constituents were saying, hey man, are you going to vote against this? Like, are you going to represent us here? This is important. This is about our water supply. And at the same time, my livelihood basically depended on me shutting up and just telling them, look, I'm conflicted out because I have this job at the law firm and that's their client, and I agree with you, but I'm going to have to sit it out, and I'll work with you on other issues in the future. One day, I walked into my law firm and I quit my job, and then I went and I voted against that land deal on the city council. My house went into the foreclosure process, and I got behind on my car payments and my loan payments, and I had a whole bunch of bill collectors calling me every day. Thank God for caller ID. It's true. Hopefully none of y'all have had that situation, but I have a feeling maybe some people in this room have, right? But I was fine. I had my law degree. I was able to get a job with another law firm that didn't have those kinds of conflicts of interest. Eventually, my brother Joaquin and I had our own little law firm. So I got back up on my feet. But I was happy that when that first test came, when I was 27 years old, that I did the right thing to stand up for the people that I was supposed to represent. And you hear that politics can be dirty or corrupting. I had worried that I would have to change who I was. There's nobody that gets tested more than the President of the United States. This president has failed that test. He's failed that test. But I want you to know that if you elect me president, that I will keep my eye on the ball. That I will work hard every single day so that you and your family can have good health care when you need it. that your children and your grandchildren can get a good education because they have a strong partner in Washington that understands the importance of working with states and with local school districts to invest in their ability to succeed and achieve their own dreams. And that you can have good job opportunities out there whether you live in a small town or a big city. Because I'm not going to be insulting people on Twitter or playing golf or hosting people at my mansion. I don't have a mansion. I'm going to be focused on doing what's right for the American people and for your family. In this campaign, I'm not taking any federal lobbyist money. I'm not taking any PAC money. A couple of days ago when they had the latest contribution expenditure reports, you know what? I was nowhere near the top in terms of the money raised right now. But I was very proud that we had the highest percentage of small dollar contributors of any of the campaigns out there because people are starting to give their $5, their $10, their $20, $1, whatever they can give. I want you to know that I'm going to keep working hard like our families do, little by little getting stronger and stronger in this campaign. And I believe that if I keep doing that, that by the time we get to Iowa on February 3rd, and then New Hampshire on February 10th, and then my home state of Texas on March 3rd. But first we're going to stop here in South Carolina in late February. I believe that here in South Carolina that I can become a front runner. And I can do well, that I can win, that I can go on November 3rd and beat Donald Trump, because we need to defeat Donald Trump. We need to defeat Donald Trump. And that on January 20th, 2021, that all of us are going to say to this president, Donald Trump, adios. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, South Carolina. Thank you, Greenville.
To answer a few of the questions, I think he addressed most of all the questions that I saw. I think he addressed everything that you guys had, especially healthcare. I saw a lot of questions on healthcare. Sir, we wanted to ask you, how would you hold violators? We talked about the criminal justice reform, and you talked about your plan, but how would you hold them accountable to end racism within our system? How would you hold them accountable?
I think that we have to use a carrot and a stick with local law enforcement and with DAs and prosecutors. Ideally, we would do it by incentivizing through federal funding, right? You always want to try and carrot first. I think we need to work with our local communities to improve the way that they do policing and the way that they prosecute, how they handle different people of different backgrounds in the criminal justice system. And so I would incentivize those communities that are doing particularly good work to continue to do it, and also try and set in place new standards like that national use of force standards that if communities did not adopt, they could lose federal funding. So it's both of those things. It's using incentives and then also not being afraid to withdraw funding if there are gross injustices that are happening based on racial or ethnic or other lines in terms of the criminal justice system. On top of that, as I mentioned, we want to keep people out of the criminal justice system in the first place. So that's why we need to improve education. That's why we need to do things like legalize marijuana. That's why we need to invest in diversion programs so that people can get the help that they need instead of getting trapped in this criminal justice system. I believe if we do those things, that we're going to address the racial imbalance and bias that too often exists, whether it's in policing or in our courts.
Great. Awesome. Next question. Do you think restricting purchases of ammunition is a useful way of combating gun violence?
That's a good question. We're coming up right now, or we're going to start working on actually soon, because we're rolling out our policy. We're going to start working on our gun violence prevention policy. I generally agree with all of the common sense gun reforms that have been proposed, a new assault weapons ban, limiting the capacity of magazines, making sure that we have universal background checks, also red flag laws. I don't believe that somebody who's been convicted of domestic violence should get their hands on a weapon. And I believe that we can look at other creative ideas of how we can bring down gun violence, prevent that. And so we'll consider that one that's been suggested. But we'll think through that and roll out a policy.
Great. And as an Hispanic American, how do you plan to beat you know who?
Yeah.
I want to read how it was written.
Well, some of y'all may have read, there was a really fascinating article in the New York Times, I think it was by Nate Cohn, that probably for a lot of Democrats has this alarming headline that essentially says that Trump may be getting stronger in the Electoral College. And that he could lose the popular vote by up to 5 million votes and still win the Electoral College. First of all, we need to abolish the Electoral College. We've had two people, Al Gore and Hillary Clinton, that got more votes in the last 20 years, but George Bush and Donald Trump became the president. Can you imagine what kind of shape our country, what better shape we'd be in if that had been Al Gore and that had been Hillary Clinton? Think about all of that. The Iraq War. I mean, the divisiveness of this Trump administration, the scapegoating of immigrants. How many people's lives would be better if we had gone by the popular vote? One person would vote instead of this outdated Electoral College. And both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump at different times had called for the abolition of the Electoral College. So this is nothing radical or new. Plenty of people have called for this. But let me get to the point. Look, we're not going to beat Donald Trump by trying to be Donald Trump. You're never going to out-gutter Donald Trump.
No.
You don't need to out-gutter Donald Trump to win. What do we need to do to win? We basically need to offer the American people a strong, compelling vision of our own for the future that resonates with families out there, with voters about what they need directly in their lives. Healthcare, education, job opportunities, to be treated fairly no matter who you are. I also believe that, in 2016, people said, well, can you talk about economic justice and racial justice together? Those absolutely go together. They always go hand in hand, and we can talk about them in a way that is consistent, no matter what the background of our family is. That's what I'm trying to do. I see it fundamentally as counter-programming. You know how on a network, if a network is showing, like CBS is showing a great drama, like the other network won't show another drama, they'll show like a sports game, or they'll show a comedy or a horror movie or something. Or in sports, people that are often considered invincible, teams or individuals, are often defeated not by somebody that has the exact same skill set as them, but by a team or individual that is excellent with a different skill set. His skill set is dividing people, racial priming, and trying to eke out everything that he can from a base. Our skill set has certainly to make sure our base turns out, but to build coalitions, to be about unity. In that sense, I do believe that Barack Obama set a very good blueprint for what we have to do to win an election, which is to bring people together on these common aspirations that we have for our country. That's how you beat Donald Trump.
Awesome. So for the sake of time, thank you all so much for being here. Isn't he a great guy?
Thanks a lot, y'all. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I hope you'll spread a good word out there. Gracias.